Hey there, since Thanksgiving is upon us, as I'm recording this video, it's just a week out. I wanted to share a little Thanksgiving story. Rather than me try to share the story myself, I figured I would defer to one of the best storytellers of our day. His name is Stephen Mansfield, and this is called A Thanksgiving Meditation. I'm just going to read it, and I urge you to pay attention and to let it sink in, and I think it'll have quite an impact as you celebrate this year. It must have been the most horrifying experience of their lives. Though there were slightly more than 100 people aboard the Mayflower, only 54 were from the band of separatists who had lived in Holland the previous 12 years to escape persecution in England. They were farmers and sheep herders for the most part, though some may have been craftsmen of one kind or another. Now, just my own thoughts on that the thing that sticks out to me there is that these were regular people, just like you and I. Yet never had they been on the high seas. So it must have seemed as though the very demons of hell were loosed upon them during that fall of 1620. The storms of the North Atlantic were so fierce and the ship so tossed that the main mast often dipped into the waves. It was a disorienting, gut-wrenching experience, even for the experienced sailors among them. The small band of believers on board, men, women, and expectant mother. An expectant mother was on board during this time. Unbelievable. And small children. Couldn't imagine. I have small children myself. Were kept in the 'tween deck for fear of the buffeting storms. Many were sick. Some wailed their agonies endlessly through the terrifying nights. The icy winds wailed with them. It was a filthy, smelly, terrifying time of testing. The elements were not only opposition these Christians, who would soon be called pilgrims, endured. There was one sailor who persisted in calling them psalm-singing puke stockings, which were the two things they spent most of their time doing. Wow. Though the pilgrims forgave and prayed for the man's soul, he was mysteriously the only person to die during the voyage. For 66 days, the little ship, no longer than a modern volleyball court, made the treacherous voyage from England to the coast of what would one day be Massachusetts. When the pilgrims arrived, what must their thoughts have been as they stared at the howling wilderness that was to be their home? William Bradford, later their governor, recalled, "Being thus past the vast ocean and a sea of troubles before, in their preparation, they had now no friends to welcome them, no inns to entertain or refresh their weather-beaten bodies, no house, or much less towns to repair to seek for succor. What could sustain them but the Spirit of God and His grace? May not and ought not the children of these fathers rightly say, our fathers were Englishmen which came over this great ocean and were ready to perish in this wilderness? And perish they almost did. More than half of them died during that first winter, often called the starving time. At one point, each person's ration for a day was no more than 5 kernels of corn and a few ounces of brackish water. Native friends like Squanto and Samoset taught the whites how to harvest the bay and the land, but the yield would not be sufficient until the next year. So they buried their dead and prayed for the mercy of God. In the spring they planted and soon after began sensing that God had heard their prayers. The previous winter had been the worst of times, but the harvest looked bountiful now. The settlement was growing and God seemed to be smiling upon them. When the harvest was gathered that fall, their leaders called for some of the men to go hunting in preparation for a great feast to celebrate the goodness of God. Wild fowl, fish, and venison were gratefully prepared. They invited their native friends too, who brought 5 freshly killed deer. The white women prepared hoe cakes, cornmeal pudding, and a variety of vegetables, while the Indian women introduced delicacies made with blueberries, apples, and cherries. The most welcome new food the natives brought with them, though, was a new way of cooking corn in an earthen pot until it became white and fluffy. Popcorn. It was indeed a Thanksgiving, but not just for safety and abundance of food. It was also a time to remember the words they had penned about their purpose for coming while they were still on board the Mayflower. They came, they said, for the glory of God and the advancement of the Christian faith, for propagating and advancing the gospel of the kingdom of Christ in those remote parts of the world. Yet, though they should be but even a stepping stone unto others for the performing of so great, last sentence, a work. So they were, and we ought to remember them this Thanksgiving and take their mission to our hearts. So as you're celebrating this Thanksgiving, as will I, with family, friends, and good food, and maybe some football, enjoy those things, and at the same time, just remember what these people sacrificed. As you heard, they had a ration was just 5 kernels of corn. As we're celebrating with all this food that we have, let us remember that's what they had to try to survive on, and many of them died. And also just reminds me of the purpose that they had, such a strong sense of purpose, and to cause us to think about the purpose in our lives and what we're doing each day in those little things, and in the reason why we're here, and the mission and the vision we have for ourselves. And so I hope this helps you just slow down a little bit, and just have a good understanding of Thanksgiving. I know for me, I lose that oftentimes. I lose the remembrance of that sacrifice and those sacrifices, and it causes a little bit of entitlement. We feel like, or I feel like I deserve certain things, or it's just normal to have all this abundance that we all have. If you're watching this, you have abundance compared to those folks. So we'd love to hear your thoughts, and feel free to share. Talk to you soon. God bless.